I'm doing this video about Geronimo, the Wild West Indian, Apache Indian, and I'm doing this video because I really question if the story about him is true. I want to give a quick narration, the basic history. I'm going to gloss over a lot of things, but whatever I say in the narration will give you a basic idea of the history of Geronimo, and then I'll go on why I question it. Geronimo, the basic nutshell story of Geronimo is he was born in 1829, somewhere between Arizona and the Mexican border. And during the time that he was born, the Apache Indians and the Mexican people and government were at a war. The Apaches were raiding, killing. The Mexican government had troops that were fighting the Apache Indians. This is the world Geronimo was born into. And as he grew up, as a young man, he was in the wars and fighting. But then he left his village, him and a bunch of braves, to go on a raiding party or a hunting party. And while he was gone, according to history, that I do question, according to history, some Mexican troops came into Geronimo's camp. And Geronimo wasn't there. A lot of the Apaches, his braves and stuff, weren't there. They were out hunting or raiding. And the Mexican troops came and killed most of the village, killed women, children, devastated the village. Geronimo and his braves come back afterwards and they see the carnage. Lots of dead Indians, women, children were killed. Anyway, at this time, Geronimo comes back and he's devastated at what he sees. His family's dead. His parents are dead. He's devastated. This time he becomes real bitter. He swears revenge on the Mexican people. And he's, according to what's written, he just was full of hate and bitterness. And even the other Apaches did not like Geronimo because he was so bitter and hateful. This is what history says. But they respected him because at this time he became a super warrior. He killed, was a skilled warrior. He was known as a skilled warrior to the Mexicans, Mexican army, and also to his fellow Apaches. So he got a lot of respect from his fellow Apaches. And according to history, that Geronimo, this time, killed 500 to 600 Mexicans. And then 5,000 Mexicans died in Apache raids. Then, this went on for some time, and then there's a war between the United States and Mexico. War that's not talked about much. And it was between 1846 and 1848. According to history, the United States won this war. And after the war, Mexico sold a bunch of land to the United States, and they called it land acquisition. And it was a lot of land, which is now part of Texas, part of Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Nevada, and part or maybe all of California. So it was a lot of land. But this land was, a lot of it was in Apache country. And at this time, Geronimo was not a chief. He's a warrior, but a very famous and feared warrior. And when the U.S. purchased this land, according to history, white settlers from the east come to settle this land, mostly to gold mine, and then some ranchers came in. And at first, when this happened, the Indians and the white settlers, Apache Indians, I should say, and white settlers got along. They were not fighting. But something strange happened, and I won't go into it because this video is not about that. But something with Cochise and the U.S. Army, and that started the war between the Apaches and the white settlers. And because of this war with the white settlers and Apaches, the U.S. Army and the Apaches were raiding and killing, but also the white settlers were shooting and And it was the Wild West. It was, people were killing everybody, and it's truly the Wild West. But during this time, the U.S. sent troops over to fight the Apaches. Now, after several battles, the Apaches, under co-chiefs, decided to surrender to the U.S. Army, and they agreed to live on these reservations that the Army set up for them. Okay, after several battles with the U.S. Army, the Apaches under co-chiefs decided to live on the reservation that the U.S. government had set up for the Apache Indians. And during this time, Cochise dies. And anyway, they're on the reservation for a while. And Geronimo and a few Apaches, they did not like living on the reservation. And they escaped the reservation. Geronimo with about 150 men, approximately 120 to 150 men, and with some women and children, and they escaped. And during this time, they raided. They killed ranchers. They were battling Wild West cowboys. They were battling cavalry. They were battling Mexicans. When they go south of the border, they were fighting Mexican troops. They were, I'd imagine, fighting Mexican settlers, Mexican ranchers. And this time, the Army came after Geronimo and his men again, and they decided to surrender again and go back to the reservation. So they did. But again, Geronimo, after a while, like 9 months or something like that, he didn't like Geronimo life, and he did it again. He escaped from the Indian reservation. And this time, he went on a terror. History says, now I'm going to skip over a lot of it because it's just too much, but history says that the Apaches raided this ranch and killed the settlers there, and hung this girl up with a meat hook under her skull and left her there to hang. So they were pretty vicious. Same time, history says that there was a peaceful Indian village that was by Tucson, Arizona, and the people hated the Apaches so bad, and this village had about 400 Apaches, that they hired, the Tucson citizens hired mercenaries to come in and kill these Apaches that were in this reservation, or in this camp next to the reservation by Tucson. And they also killed women and children. And also, I'm throwing this in here, is there's also supposed to be a big war between the Apache Indians and Wild West miners. 30 miners and Wild West Indians got in a big gunfight out in the desert. And I didn't read how many miners got killed, but supposedly 4 Apache Indians got killed. So this was really the Wild West, according to history. And it wasn't a place that you would want to raise a family. Being a woman or child wouldn't necessarily save you. It wasn't a place for sissies. It was wild and a lot of bloodshed. And in the middle of this bloodshed was Geronimo and his band of Apaches. And according to history, he had about 120 to 150 Apache warriors. And they would go back and forth to Mexico to Arizona border. If he goes down to Mexico, he had 3,000 Mexican troops that were after him. He goes north to Arizona, he had 5,000 American troops after him, plus Wild West miners, cowboys were his enemy. Plus, according to history, the Navajo and the Comanche Indians were also his enemy. So you could say he was in the middle of a lot of enemies and no friends. So this General Crook, who was down there with the troops, with 5,000 U.S. troops, had no success in getting Geronimo because he was a master at guerrilla warfare. If they thought when they have him boxed in the canyon or something, him and his Apache Indians would give him the slip, and they couldn't make any real progress with his hit and run tactics. And he knew the desert too good. He'd evade them. So General Crook had no success in tracking down and killing Geronimo's band of Indians, even though a lot of pressure was on him from Washington. So General Crook decided that he needed to do something different. He employed Apache Indians from the reservation that stayed on the reservation, that didn't escape with Geronimo, to help him. And these Indians were called, Apache Indians were called the Apache Scouts. And he had about 1,000 Apache Scouts. with these Apache scouts, because they knew the area better and they knew how to track better, General Crook was having a lot more success with the Apache scouts, and Apache scouts were starting to take a toll on Geronimo's men and Geronimo, putting real pressure on Geronimo. And then one day these Apache scouts found Geronimo's camp, surrounded it, and attacked his camp, and killed many of his warriors and I guess women and children too. Geronimo escaped with some of his braves, but that incident shocked Geronimo and surprised Geronimo, because Geronimo felt that he was safe at this camp that was supposedly high up in the mountains, and he thought it was safe from attacks. So all this pressure from the U.S. Army, and especially the Apache scouts, Geronimo decided to surrender. So he comes in to surrender. And this is the part where, to me, the story gets pretty questionable. When he came in to surrender, this one photographer was there, and his name was C.S. Lewis Fly. And he took 15 pictures of Geronimo and his Indians, American Indians, while they came into surrender, and before, officially, when they were still at war with the United States government, when they were still at war with the U.S. government. And took 15 pictures. Now this is where things get questionable to me about the story. Okay, on this picture, what struck me as very strange is not only the Indians are posing for the camera, and all these pictures of C.S. Lewis Fly, all the Indians are posing. You got to remember that cameras weren't like they are today, easy to take. They had to set them up on stands, put a cloth over the photographer's head, and take a picture. But these Indians posing. But the thing I noticed is their clothing is in very good shape. Their clothing is no wear and tear on their clothing. It looks like it's brand new clothing. I've always noticed this watching Western movies. It always kind of bothered me that the cowboys' clothing was perfect, the Indians' clothing was perfect. But you can say that's a movie and shut up, just watch the movie. That's what you'd tell me. Well, this is not supposed to be movie Indians. These are supposed to be the real thing, the real Indians, the real Wild West Indians. Yet, like the Hollywood Indians, their clothing is in perfect shape, no wear and tear. I find that very questionable. The other thing that I noticed, this picture, and Wild West Indians, and no Indian is more Wild West than Geronimo. They were known as bareback fighters. They fought on their horse bareback. This is in Western books. This is in movies. This is in paintings. This is what history tells us. But these Indians are in saddles, big saddles. One here is Geronimo, and this is Natchez. He's also a famous Indian warrior. And you'd think they would be on bareback. But yet, they're in big saddles, big stirrups, big heavy saddles, big bridles. Everything that I would need to ride a horse, these guys have. And that also goes against the narrative of why the American Indian, or Wild West Indian, I should say, was they were so mobile, because they didn't have to put a saddle. They didn't have the gear. They just jump on the horse and go. Jump on the horse, maybe have a blanket, that's it, and then have a rope tied to the muzzle of the horse, and they're gone. They didn't have to saddle up. But these guys have big, heavy saddles. Big equipment to slow them down. That goes against what I've been taught or read about the American Indian. I think that's pretty questionable. And then the other thing that I found very questionable about it was, according to history, this sounds strange, but Geronimo asked C.S. Lewis Fly if he would take a picture of him and his kids when he comes into surrender. Again, I would think that he wouldn't even know what a camera would be, because he's away from civilization out in the desert. But not only that, but he would have other things on his mind. He's going to surrender. I would think he'd have things on his mind, like, are they going to ambush me, or what they're going to do to me, or what kind of deal I could make. But no, he wanted a picture with his family. You could say photo ops been going on for a long time, way before today. It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't add up. So he comes in to surrender, Geronimo does, and his band of Apaches after his photo op. And I guess Geronimo, for all his war crimes he did, got sentenced to prison. It says 14 years, but then it says he got 23 years. He spent the rest of his life in prison. That's what history tells us. I'm surprised they didn't hang him, because the Wild West narrative is they'd hang people for stealing horses. Geronimo did way more than just steal horses. He did steal horses. He stole cows. He killed girls on meat hooks. He killed a lot of people, but no, they gave him prison, okay? So I'm going to gloss over this part. Supposedly they put some of the Apache Indians on a train and sent them to Florida. Some they sent to Pennsylvania. Geronimo went to a prison camp in Florida, I think, then Texas. And then he ended up in Fort Sills, Oklahoma. And then, according to history, he spent the last 23 years of his life in prison. Now, one would think that that would be about the end of the story for Geronimo. But not exactly. Geronimo, while he's at this prison of war prison, soon, I don't know how soon, went to work for the 101 Ranch, which was a big dude ranch in Oklahoma. And what he did at the dude ranch was, for guests, I guess his ranch was huge, he worked in the Wild West show on the ranch. He was a Wild West performer. And I find this very strange and very questionable. He went from the Wild West true Indian, fighting and killing and stuff, to a performer pretty easily. Now, I'm not an actor, so I don't know what it takes, but I know it takes something. You know, you got to learn something, go to classes or something to know about acting and performing, but obviously he did. He just went right to it. I find that strange. Also, I find very questionable is they let him out of prison. They let Geronimo out of prison to work at the 101 Ranch. And he does this fake buffalo hunt show with fake cowboys, and he works with early entertainers, some that made early Hollywood films like Tom Mix and Will Rogers. And this is a picture of Geronimo as prisoner of war. Now, I happen to know a little about prisons. I'm an ex-prison guard. And when you take a prisoner out of the prison, they're supposed to be in a uniform, a prison uniform. They're supposed to be in restraints. He's not in a prison uniform. There's no restraints. There's supposed to be 2 guards around him, but they're not in the picture. And it's just odd that he works at a Wild West show while he's in prisoner, as a prisoner of war. So if that wasn't enough, kind of very questionable, I'd almost say nonsensical, that he went, then he quit the 101 Ranch, or got fired, don't really say it, don't matter. Then he went to work for Pawnee Bill's Wild West show. And Pawnee Bill's Wild West show, I guess, toured all over the United States. Again, in this super prison that he was in. You know, it just, I don't know, I don't understand this prison he's in. You might could call it even a magical prison. I don't know, enchanted prison. That even people on probation and parole are usually restricted to a state or a county or a town, but not Geronimo. As prisoner of war, he gets to work for Pawnee Bill's Wild West show touring the country. And then on top of that, he goes to world fairs that they had at the time. And he went to the 1898 Trans-Mississippi International Expo, Omaha, Nebraska World Fair. He went to the Pan American Expedition Buffalo, New York World Fair in 1901. And the Trans-Mississippi International Expo, Omaha, Nebraska Fair, 1891. And then also he went to the St. Louis World Fair in 1905. I find that strange that Geronimo was invited by the President of the United States to go to the World's Fair. I find that strange as a prisoner of war that the President would want him to go to the World's Fair. And then also, according to history, they had Geronimo days at the World's Fair. Now, I find that questionable. It seemed like there'd be a lot of people who wouldn't like Geronimo for all his killing and stuff that he did, but they had Geronimo days at the World's Fair. He was popular. He sold his autograph. He printed up pictures of himself. And then this is his own words at the World's Fair. When I was first asked to attend the St. Louis World's Fair, I did not wish to go. Later, when I was told that I would receive good attention and protection, and that the President of the United States said that it would be all right, I consented and kept by the parties in charge of the Indian Department, who had obtained permission from the President. I stayed in this place for 6 months. So he was at the World Fair for 6 months. I guess he didn't have to go as a prisoner of war. You know, this prison, he's a prisoner, but he don't have to stay any time at the prison. It's a very good prison he's at. And then it goes on, and this is a newspaper article, but it goes on, and I won't read it all because it'd take too long, but it sounds like he's having a very good time at the World's Fair. But then at the end, it says something very strange and unusual that don't, to me, add up to the narrative. And he says, I am glad I went to the fair. I saw many interesting things and learned much of the white people. They are a very kind and peaceful people. During all the time I was at the fair, no one tried to harm me in any way. Had this been among the Mexicans, I'm sure I should have been compelled to defend myself often. I wish all my people could have attended the fair. Now, let's think about this for a second. He was fighting white people in the army out in the desert, and killing ranchers, killing whites, and he knew about the whites, but now he's saying he didn't, first time he was around the white people, and that he likes them. Okay, this doesn't make sense to me, but okay, we'll move on. Then, if that wasn't enough, that makes me question the story of Geronimo and who he was. The next year, he's invited to the President Inauguration. Teddy Roosevelt in 1905 gets elected as President of the United States. And he invites Geronimo for his inauguration. And I find this very strange because he was a big enemy of the U.S. government. According to what is said, that it cost $40 million, according to history, for the military to bring Geronimo and his men in. Plus, Geronimo supposedly in his Apache band killed over 1,000 white settlers and U.S. cavalry. But yet, the president invites him to the World's Fair. And keep in mind, 40 million back then is a lot less than 40 million is now. They had a half a cent back then in their in the money. So that would be in the billions today. But yet, they invited him to President Roosevelt invited him to his inauguration. And I think that would be comparable to a modern day president inviting the leader of ISIS or the leader of the Taliban to his inauguration today. I don't think that would be a very good political move. It wouldn't make sense. It seemed like a lot of people in the army would resent it. But this is what history tells us. And here's a picture of Geronimo at marching down Pennsylvania Avenue. And I'm not sure which one's supposed to be Geronimo, but one of these Indians are supposed to be Geronimo. And he's marching with army bands, same army that he was fighting with in the desert, that he was trying to kill them, they were trying to kill him. But yet they're all together in a parade, having a good time, celebrating Teddy Roosevelt's inauguration. I find that very strange, very questionable. According to history, after the parade, Geronimo got to talk to President Teddy Roosevelt at the time. And according to the New York Tribune, reported was a pathetic appeal by Geronimo to return to Arizona. He supposedly said to Teddy Roosevelt, "Take the ropes from our hands," Geronimo begged, with tears running down his bullet-scarred cheeks. What, he got shot in the face or something? Okay, anyway. Through an interpreter, Roosevelt told Geronimo that the Indian had a bad heart. "You killed many of my people. You burned villages. You were not good Indians. The president would have to wait a while to see how you and your people act on their reservation." Okay, what's strange to me about that story is Geronimo was working in Wild West shows, world fairs, and he didn't know any English. He didn't pick up any English during this time, and he needed an Indian interpreter. It would seem like he would know some English, and I find that questionable. And also, according to what I read, was Geronimo complained to Teddy Roosevelt that he was punished enough. He was an old man, and he was punished enough for what he did when he was young. And I have to disagree. I don't think he was punished hardly at all. I mean, world fairs, Pawnee Bills, Wild West shows. Yeah, that don't really sound like too much punishment to me. Even though he got 23 years in prison, he didn't have to spend any of it in this special prison he was in. Spend any time in this special prison. So, but anyway, that's what history tells us. So, I guess so according to history, he had to go back to the prison. He was at the prison. And at this prison as we know already, the prison is a special kind of prison. Not your normal prison. So this shouldn't surprise us. In this prison, he gets to ride horses in this prison. So as a prisoner of war, he's riding a horse. He's an old man now, 79 years old. He's riding his horse, and it's raining. And he falls off his horse. And he hits a mud puddle or something. He's there on the road. His family gets worried about him because he don't show up when he's supposed to show up. They go looking for him. And by the way, Geronimo has a new family now. Remember his old family got killed in Mexico? Well, he ended up getting a new family. And also he's had 9 wives. So between all this fighting and prisoner of war time, he's managed to do a lot of romancing and divorcing and marrying also. So his family goes out to look for him, and they find him along the road, sick. He's got pneumonia, so they take him to the hospital. And supposedly he tells his relative that the biggest regret he has in his life is he ever surrendered to the United States government. He wished he fought to the last man. And then he dies bitter and dies. I mean, he's bitter, then he dies. Now, I think if I was Geronimo, I would have said, I wish I surrendered sooner. I mean, you know, he'd have got to go to more world fairs, more Wild West barbecues. And you can call me an odd sort, but I'd rather go on a Wild West show, get shot by cap guns, get paid for it, then go to the big barbecue afterwards, than being out in the desert, getting shot at by real guns, and no payment and no barbecues. But anyway, that's what Geronimo says, that he wished he fought to the death. Yes, okay. Also, what I would like to add on this is nothing to me about Geronimo adds up. He was a criminal Indian. He killed, according to history, over 1,000 settlers, white settlers, him and his Indian renegades, settlers and army. Also, it took over $40 million to capture him. Yet, they named a U.S. ship after him. A U.S. Liberty ship was named after Geronimo. Now, that's really strange to me because he was a big enemy of the United States. I mean, I'm glad they quit doing that because we'd have the ships named after what? Osama bin Laden, USS Osama bin Laden, or the pilots that bombed Pearl Harbor. I mean, I'm glad we don't do that anymore. And if the U.S. government wanted to honor an Apache Indian, why don't they name the ship after the Apache scouts that were instrumental in bringing Geronimo in and bringing him in and capturing him? They were brave, they were tough, they should have got some credit, but no, they get no credit, and Geronimo gets all the credit. And the U.S. government seems to love him. So, I don't know. Sounds really fishy to me, and this one might explain some of this. Here's a picture of Geronimo's gravestone. And what we see here is a pyramid. This is a Masonic symbol. So also, Geronimo was a Mason, a Freemason. Somewhere he joined the lodge. And I don't know too much about Freemasons because they're a secret society. And but I do know that Freemasons a lot of Freemasons have pyramids on their tombstone. I know it's a Freemasonry symbol. Also, on the back of dollar bills, there's the Freemason symbol with the eye, the pyramid. I'm sure you've seen that. Most people have. So, he was also a Freemason. So, in conclusion, I want to just say one thing. I believe our history's fake. I believe Geronimo's fake. I don't think he is what they told us. Also, I would like to say one thing in conclusion of my video is when I was growing up as a kid in rural northern Nevada, we got 3.5 TV stations where I live. And when I say half is one station only came in half the time. But on these stations as a kid, and I'm talking about the early 70s, they showed a lot of rerun westerns on these TV stations. And on the old westerns that were made in the 50s and 60s, that always they would show the cowboy as the good guy, the Indian as the bad guy. And me watching the movies, it went without saying who was the good guy and who was the bad guy. And the people around me thought the same thing. As time went on, I noticed that the new westerns changed the narrative. Till all of a sudden, the Indians were the good guys and the white guys or cowboys were the bad guys. And right along with the change in the movies, I seen people's opinions change right along with it. And what that showed me was that movies have a powerful influence on the way people think. And I believe I don't know who they are. If they're Masons, if they're globalists, who they are, but I do believe they exist. And that they've been using entertainment and movies for a long time to control, or to, I should say, influence the way we think. And that also, I think they presented us with a fake history. And I think they know what it is. I would like to know what it is. I doubt I'll ever know it. But why I would like to know our true history is for two things. First, I'd like to know the truth. Not some fake truth, but the real truth. And the second thing I would like to know, is what in our real history do they don't want us to know? It must be pretty big to present us with a fake history to cover our real history. So what do they want us to be ignorant about? I have speculation of what that could be, but of course I don't know. Anyway, thanks for watching my video and have a good day.